thanks for taking the time to sit here, and it's a real honor and pleasure to be speaking to you. I've been watching your stuff for years, so.
Yeah, pleasure. No, I like doing this.
Yeah. So I would love to just have an informal flow conversation. It doesn't have to get too technical or too scientific, and just see what comes up. I have some ideas that I want to speak about, but I mainly just want to go with the flow. So I would love to hear how you got started in this world of detox and health, and how it all began.
So, really my sort of upbringing in medicine started, in Germany, and I was fortunately, while I studied medicine, there wasn't the hard boundary between alternative medicine and conventional medicine. We had compulsory courses in homeopathy and acupuncture, manual therapy, and so by the time I graduated from medical school, I had a pretty good working understanding of classic homeopathy and acupuncture and auricular medicine, a lot of the things that now considered alternative. Now, that was the last year I graduated. It was the last year where I was part of medical school before the pharmaceutical interest hit, and so. And I also had the fortune, in a way, my mother was a medical doctor, and she was totally steeped in alternative medicine of her time. And I grew up in near the same village, just 5 kilometers apart from Dr. Voll. He developed the electroacupuncture according to Dr. Voll, or EAV, now called electrodermal testing, which is really the mother of diagnostic work in alternative medicine, and Dr. Voll was my doctor when I was growing up, and so I thought energy medicine was medicine and everything else was alternative. So I did, and then I moved to India shortly after medical school. I studied psychology and did a thesis in really vascular medicine. It's called angiology. I completed that, and then did a residency in surgery, because I loved the technical part of medicine. And then moved to India for a couple of years and worked as a medical doctor there. That was at the time considered part of a residency program in general medicine. And so I did that, and in India, so we had contact with virtually physicians from all over the world. That I learned about herbal medicine from Australia, and I learned about whatever chiropractic is, because it didn't exist in Europe at the time, and osteopathy, and really learned the medical systems outside the mainstream medical system, and so over time, I learned how to work with magnets, and I learned how to work with microcurrent, and pretty much everything that's there now in alternative medicine, I just knew earlier through accident, really. And so by the time I moved to the US, that was in 1982, I had a pretty well-rounded understanding of biophysics, how to use, rather than using biochemistry, to use physics in healing. And I consider acupuncture to belong there, and I also consider homeopathy an application of physics rather than biochemistry. And so by extension, I was highly sensitized, when Wi-Fi became the state-of-the-art in the telecommunications industry. I was highly sensitized towards the possible dangers of that, because I already knew what frequency bands could be used for healing. And when I looked at what frequency used for Wi-Fi, they were highly destructive. And so I had an understanding maybe earlier than many people, about the dangers, and so on, and tried to be as vocal as I could be about that, to educate at least my individual patients. And that has been a very rewarding strategy, that we realize basically that most chronic illness is actually acquired illness through mistakes made in our environment, things that are completely unnecessary, like the use of glyphosate or the use of certain frequency bands in the cell phone industry, or certain chemicals in a household, or the fluoridation of the drinking water. The list is not that long, of just basic mistakes that have been made, and the statistics are on my side, sort of that when recent polls were taken on health in Western countries, that America always comes in last. And so confirming, that the things that we're doing, that we take for granted, are just not compatible with a healthy lifestyle or healthy longevity. And at the same time, we're traveling forth and back between Australia, Germany, Austria, Switzerland, Russia, and other places. I see what is in place in terms of technology in other countries and what they're using for healing, and kind of realize, sort of that America has the loudest voice, because most medical journals and the communications industry is controlled by the US. The loudest voice with the least amount of knowledge behind it, So it's like a drunk, preaching to the crowd. And so I try to have a voice. I love America. I love that, I feel the Americans are, by and large, the probably the most good-hearted people on the planet, and I love being here, and I see the beautiful future for the country, but there's some things that have gone wrong here, and so I try to have my voice in. Hopefully there will be enough of us over the next few years to make to tip the scales into a good direction.
Yeah, I gotta fix that mic, it's itching me. There we go. Okay. So, what do you think is really happening in this world? Like, most conventional people are under the impression that it's, if you have depression or anxiety or some sort of illness, it's either, you caught a bacteria or you have neurotransmitter imbalance. What do you feel, if you had to take a big step back and see it all? Do you think it's a matter of light versus dark? What's the biggest scope you can say that's happening on the world?
Well, of course, that's I could give many answers to that, but I think light versus dark is the shortest way of expressing it. I in different lectures that I give, so make it very clear. We don't have to go into the details. In Rudolf Steiner, the Austrian mystic that was very active in the early part of the last century, the founder of Waldorf schools and biodynamic farming and a completely new kind of alternative medicine. He predicted, that towards the end of last century and the beginning of this century, there will be a movement driven by big corporations to take the soul away from people, to disconnect people from the higher world. And in order to do that, we have to destroy the pineal gland in people. And I followed the research on that, and amazingly what we found, the pineal gland is the most sensitive part of our central nervous system, and is highly, highly, highly sensitive to 4 things: aluminum, glyphosate, fluoride, and Wi-Fi. And we are the only country in the world that has pushed these 4 things in the last 60 years or so on everybody growing up here. And so what I feel, what I observe, and what we're also testing in our ART system is that people have severely calcified pineal glands. And I show the anatomy in some of my courses. It's very clear that the pineal gland is a receiver for higher fields of energy and translates them into thought and into actually controlling our immune system, our endocrine system, and so on and so forth. There's all science, but very few people pay attention to science anymore, especially since Donald Trump and his disregard for science. It's become the new norm, and so it is astounding that the telecommunications industry has selected the frequencies out of the huge spectrum of frequencies that are absolutely destructive to our cells and especially to the pineal gland. You couldn't have made any better choices than 2.4 gigahertz. That the end point, that when you have inhale aluminum, as we do from the geoengineering program, and have glyphosate in the food chain, that glyphosate and aluminum combine in the blood and in the gut and in the bloodstream to form 6 different chemical compounds where aluminum and glyphosate are hooked up together, and the end point of that compound is the pineal gland. It's published, it's not my idea. And what is needed for this compound to actually enter the brain is to open up the blood-brain barrier, and the current frequencies in the Wi-Fi world are exactly doing that. They open the blood-brain barrier, so toxins that used to stay in the bloodstream and in the body below the neck are now entering the brain very freely. That applies to all toxins, and so it's a new time in that way. When you think this through, you come to the conclusion that either there must have been an ultra intelligence group of scientists who have designed this protocol to fluoridate the drinking water, to put nanonized aluminum in the air, to put glyphosate in the food, and then activate it, spark it with the right frequencies. It took me 20 years to figure out the perfect storm that is created there. And it's either a coincidence, which is possible, that enough dumb people made the wrong choices, along the years. I'm still hoping that may be at least partially true, or it's orchestrated by a very, very intelligent group of destructive minds. Or what I also believe is very possible, that there's some higher fields of consciousness that can be both tuned into the light and to life affirmative action, and can be absolutely destructive, like phenomena like Adolf Hitler and others, people that come under the influence of something absolutely dark and destructive. And I do believe it's very possible that enough scientists and politicians have come under that influence of those higher fields and are acting according to it, actually not knowing on a human level why they're doing what they're doing and what they're doing. A good example is 5G. To put it on posts, along the streets. Okay, that's one issue, but putting it on satellite and actually the government approving to put it on satellite, blasting the whole planet with a frequency that has never been checked for safety, for its influence on the insects, on the songbirds, has never been checked for anything, and to approve that is unconceivable to like somebody who's still got a little bit of a brain left. And that politicians in the White House and other countries are conspiring with that can only be explained that their brains have come under the influence of some larger, higher field. They cannot be human in nature, because the human nature is always life affirmative and loving and wanting to live and make the biosphere more friendly to life. And so there's some scary thoughts about that, but I'm still hoping, I'm still putting my weight on, let's hope it's just a coincidence and enough dumb people made enough dumb decisions, and if enough of us wake up and point it out to them, that there can be a reversal. The Wi-Fi can be switched off in a second. We'd be done with that, and glyphosate could be forbidden, tomorrow. It's in the water table for many years, but there could be an end to it. The chemtrail program could be stopped like that. So the good thing is that solutions, positive solutions that are suppressed right now, that are everywhere, could be the norm of tomorrow. Within 24 hours, we could turn the planet from a creature that is threatened on all levels to paradise, virtually within 24 hours. We're still close enough to that. The summer I spent time kayaking in the largest wilderness area in the continental US, in Idaho. And when you fly to Boise, Idaho, and then you take a small plane that only seats like 4 or 5 people to the input, we put the boat into the river, and you fly for like 2 hours over this wilderness area. And I saw that 2/3 of the trees were dead. It just looked like flying over an endless graveyard. Had the same experience, being in Colorado 2 years ago, driving through the Rocky Mountains, seeing nothing but dead forests. I think things are much closer, to a tipping point where we need to make some very significant choices than people know. And the thing for me that's absolutely amazing is the silence in the media, the lack of reporting in television and in the general media, and even on the internet, the lack of reporting how grave the situation is right now. The example that every reader will understand is your memory loss. Why do you think in the last few years most of you lost significant amounts of your memory? You think it's just you? It's 80% of the population, and it's serious. And how often you read that on the front page of the paper? Probably not. The papers will point, oh yeah, there is some people with Alzheimer's disease and we need new funding for that and all that. But it's not pointing towards you. You're suffering from this, and you make some bad decisions because you don't remember all the details that you're supposed to remember. And that of course has to do with the things that I talk about, and so we're trying to educate people, without blaming anybody. I don't think, neither in politics, nor in the pharmaceutical industry, nor in the cell phone industry, nor in AT&T, is a real evil person. I don't see that, I don't believe that. But there is fields of consciousness that have grabbed many people in those decision-making positions that is absolutely scary right now for us who are not seized by those forces.
Do you think they mine energy? Because I always imagined, like all this spiritual energy and life force that humans aren't connected to, where is it going? If energy can't be created nor destroyed, who's eating that? I always imagined there were and can feel forces that kind of come in and eat that. I don't know if you're allowed to talk about that.
the Dementors from Harry Potter. Yeah, no, I know. I mean, of course, that we could go more into the philosophical and religious aspects of that, but I'm shocked at the lack of response of the Christian church to the environmental crisis. Let me give you an example of this. It was a few years ago, I treated a pastor of one of those mega churches, when he gave a sermon with like 6,000 people there, and he was sponsoring teachings, to his group, sort of where they regularly, twice a month or so, they had like weekend get-togethers or evening meetings where they invited lecturers on it. And so he had developed a serious illness and ended up in my office, knowing that I could most likely help him with it. And so I asked him after a few visits and said, listen, I would love so much, to give a talk to your audience that you have created regarding protecting you from Wi-Fi and cleaning up your food from glyphosate and becoming aware of the geoengineering program that's going on. He said, you stop right there. He said, you know what would happen to my church? I would lose all the sponsors. And then he pointed towards all the diamond rings on his hand. He said, I would lose all of that. He said, Dietrich, I'm sorry, I cannot do that. That was for me the end of the Christian church. And I know other churches are the same, you know, sort of that the religious community have completely failed assessing the seriousness of our condition right now and translating it into teaching to their flock of people, you know, like Jesus pointed out the shortcomings of his time and had no hesitance, you know, pointing the finger towards the culprits and how educating people, you know, in his lectures of how to bring up their life, to how to enhance their life. And some of the teachings were very practical. And that is not happening in the church right now. And so we're very disappointed. At least we don't see it, you know. It could be that there's nests in the country here that are waking up. And when I moved here, you know, from Germany, because of the war, had mostly become an atheist country, because people said if God allows the Holocaust and allows that kind of war to happen, there cannot be a God, or that God we don't want, you know. And so when I grew up in Europe, it was largely an atheist country, and now religion always stays on the side of the winner in wars. And so coming over to America, I realized suddenly everybody was preaching and everybody was very deeply steeped in their religious upbringing and trusting in God and so on. I was kind of shocked by that and opened myself up to that again, to tiptoe my way into that until that experience and several other experiences adjacent to the one that I shared. So the trouble that we're having right now, there is no political group that protects the earth, not in this country. The worst group that I've seen are the Greens or the organized Greenpeace has been invaded by all the special interests or so. It is a hopeless group. In fact, you know, if you want to see evil, you go deeply into Greenpeace. There's other groups that are, I feel, are still clean, like Sea Shepherd, and there's a few outliers that are still good, but most of the big groups have been invaded by the same forces that we're talking about. And so we don't have a politician that stands with us. In fact, you know, the Democrats right now are pushing the vaccine program without actually looking at what science is available right now that says, stop, careful, this is a bad program right now that needs to be reevaluated and redesigned. You know, Merck, Sharp, and Dome. If you want to find evil on the planet, you know, sort of, and want to look at what company tops having come under the influence of that, I would probably start with Merck. You know, there's a few other things where I would direct people to. And so we don't have a political group that protects us from the toxic influences from the Wi-Fi industry, simply because none of the politicians can be elected without money, and to get the money, they need to cooperate with the devil. And so by the time they get into office, if that's what got you there, you will not be able to lose those forces while you're there. And so we have nobody in politics who is intelligently protecting us. You know, the politicians, most of them are attorneys. You know, they've never read a scientific study. They don't know how to translate the seriousness of what's found in science to political action. And so we've, you know, we scientists, we pretty closely linked with each other, and we you know, we know of the dangers of speaking up too loud and too soon, and so we're treading carefully while we're watching things getting worse and worse, and nobody really dares to take the flag and say, listen, we need to stand up together and we need to stop a large number of things in order to preserve life on the planet that has evolved, you know, over millions of years. You know, we're watching the extinction of species without any real action, you know, other than documenting it. Yes, we're beautiful in documenting the decline of conditions here, but there has been no political will to change it. I do feel people are far more ready for change than the politicians governing the people. And so we have a real problem. And overall, I'm very positive. Yeah. I do know things will change eventually, but unfortunately they will have to get quite a bit worse before there's going to be a will to change things, and there will change, and there's going to be paradise here again. There's no question. But there's going to be some collateral damage, until that happens. If you cut a tree down that's 1,000 years old, it doesn't take 1,000 years to grow it back. It takes 2,000. For the conditions in the soil to be right, will take another 1,000 years, and so. Well, basically, if you prevent destruction, the effect is tomorrow. If you allow destruction to happen, to repair it may take thousands of years. And so when we think in larger time scales, the planet is going to be okay, and we're going to be okay. But if you think in terms of 5 or 10 or 20 years, we're probably not going to be okay. What's a group of people without memory? All your memory is going down right now. That's part of the program that's unleashed on us. And so you rely more and more on your computer and your cell phone on externalizing your memory. But the computer only memorizes what you put in there. There's a lot of things you don't put in that you forget. And learning and memory hang together. If there's no memory, there's no learning. And if you have a whole humanity that can't learn anymore, there's devolution, and that's the price we pay.
What's the force that drives you? Because you've been working for so many years, so hard, so intensely. What is it inside of you that's driving you? What does it feel like? What do you think it is?
Well, my resource really is my patience. A single patient that comes back and says they have improved since they started seeing me, that gives me incredible amount of joy and pleasure, inside, and motivates me to do more. And so, I'm almost 100 years old, and I'm still working full time.
How old are you?
I'm 69. Yeah, and so, I love what I do, but not because I'm doing it, but I love it because the thankfulness of patience, that's kind of what nurtures me, and so, which in a way is strange because it makes me kind of dependent on seeing patients, which is also exhausting.
Yeah.
So
the patients feed your adrenals.
Yeah. Yeah. And and then none of us ever know where our life energy is coming from. What field we're connected to that works through us. I hope it's God, like in many of the people that I see, I think the few people that I mentioned that are under the dark influence, it's a relatively small number, but it tends to be largely people in the position of power and money. And so, but the number of us who are not seized by this field permanently is much larger, and it's just going to be beneath that tipping point.
What do you think? What do you think people could do? What are the core pieces of the puzzle to healing? Obviously, you have thousands of hours of lectures on this, but if we could just simplify it to an audience member watching this video, like what are the non-negotiables that need to get taken care of?
Yeah, I just had the patient here made a complete recovery by shielding her bedroom from Wi-Fi. Having Brian Hoyer, is the guy that we use, went to the house, did the measurements, shielded her bedroom completely from Wi-Fi, and she made a complete recovery within 2 or 3 months. So, number one is because the rollout of Wi-Fi, of the 5G, will increasingly damage all of our central nervous system. And the first thing, it's an emergency to protect your brain at least for the time while you're sleeping. And then you need some measurements, body voltage, and the Wi-Fi density that enters your bedroom. And it's pretty affordable to do the shielding. There's curtains on the wall, it's a particular wall paint. And there's some internal protection that people can do during the daytime. I'm advising a company in England called Key Science, KI Science, and they've developed a fantastic skin ointment called E-Shield. E like the letter E hyphen shield, and E-Shield it's a frequency impregnated cream that actually has a very completely natural, there's no chemicals in there, and it makes the skin reflective of Wi-Fi. That was measured, and it's like absolutely amazing, and that works. So daytime strategy is the E-Shield. There's internal stuff that people can do. There is the same company makes this product called Ray Wave. It's actually 3 things that are in there. Rosemary is one of them. That has been shown to completely stabilize the cells against the damage caused by radiation coming in. So these are 3 basic strategies, and the most simple other one is the eating organic to minimize the exposure to glyphosate. And we have people follow each meal anyway with a product called Matrix Minerals. That's from BioPure here in the US. It's a very, very sophisticated extract of fulvic acid and humic acid that has been shown in several animal studies to really extract glyphosate from your brain and from your tissues and excrete it. So those 2 are 2 key strategies. The other big boogaboo, is the aluminum, nanonized aluminum exposure from the geoengineering, from the fallout that we're all inhaling, and it's now in the food chain, it's in all bodies of water. And BioPure developed a tincture together with a number of scientists and herbalists. It's called Alu Tox, Alu and then hyphen Tox. And there's a number of herbs, and again, some frequencies impregnated that mobilize nanoparticles of aluminum from your lung and from your brain, and helps to excrete it. So I would say these are the 3 absolutely must things. The 4th one is how to get the fluoride out of the brain. So first of all, it starts with not putting any fluoride in there. So we need the fluoride extracting water filter, and that's very, very difficult to do. I use one that's called Berkey. It comes with cartridges that are pretty good in removing the fluoride. We're still looking for the best source of water, and certainly will be spring water. The best water in the US is from Idaho, from the
Valley.
There's different places in Idaho that have excellent quality spring water. I like a water from Malaysia. It's called Asilis. That's silica spelled backwards. That also comes from Key Science. That's the water that Chris Exley, he's the main aluminum researcher. He did numerous studies on how to get aluminum out of the brain, and it's that water was the most effective, more effective than medical drugs and other things. So these are just a few things, but fluoride, the only thing that mobilizes fluoride out of the brain is melatonin in high doses. So we've been using high dose melatonin as creams and as suppositories, and that is dramatically effective. It's uncomfortable for a few months, as the stuff comes out backwards, but it gets people's memory back. Fluoride is a very potent neurotoxin, and when you remove that from the brain functions comes back. And it's a beautiful thing to see in people when their spark comes back, their vitality, their creativity, their intuition, all that kind of is dependent on, it's been systematically poisoned in the US. Our brain, systematically poisoned with fluoride as a preparation for what? I don't know. In the name of what? I don't know. I like to say this here because it's a thing in my heart. When I first came to the US, I met John Yamuyanis. He was the main fluoride researcher in the 1980s. And I listened to his lectures, I got his science. And Santa Fe, where I lived at the time, I was coming up to a decision to fluoridate the drinking water or not. It was not fluoridated when I moved there. And so I was a doctor, I was well known in the community, so I drummed the community together. We're about 600 people, mostly women, mostly young mothers. I showed them, gave them all the science that was already available, how the fluoridation of the drinking water was such a fraudulent thing based on non-existing science and lying about the science of it. So it was like I delivered all the points, and 2 days later was the public opinion polls, on fluoridation, and over 90% of the same people that were there voted for the fluoridation. And that's when I knew we had a long uphill battle ahead. And so now the AMA, a few days ago, declared, that they finally discovered that fluoride is really bad for you. So we need to see what happens now. There is, like this guy, Dr. Cope, who removed smoking from the good list. It took one man who was the Surgeon General to stop smoking worldwide. I know there is still smoking, but it's much, much less than it used to be. It took one man to fight that battle who was in a position of power. We were hoping that Donald Trump is going to improve the vaccine program and that was going to improve various other things. We've seen some positive movements under his presidency, but he's embattled in so many battles, and he made himself so unpopular the way he is talking and presenting himself that he's weakened his own position in order to make any major changes, that we were hoping for. And so, yes, we need educated people in positions of executive power, and things can change like the smoking did. It took one man against everybody else who did that. And this guy should get a Nobel Prize.
What's his name?
I think his name was Koop, K-O-O-P. Or
one man brought fluoride in, right? Edward Bernays was kind of the big marketing genius behind it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think, overall, because of the things that I see, I have a positive outlook, on life. It's just being deeply steeped in where the problems are right now. It's like, oh my God, it's just like but also we were able, through the work with patients, we don't have thousands of problems. We have 4 problems. Wi-Fi, glyphosate, or let's call it agrochemicals, aluminum in the air, and fluoride in the water. If you could solve those 4 things, America would move from the worst health country to the healthiest country within maybe 2 or 3 years. It wouldn't take very long. But right now, that is left up to Russia. That we can see that in sports, sort of that the healthiest athletes that win everything come either from the former Balkan countries. They don't have fluoride in the water. The infrastructure was destroyed, so they hardly have any Wi-Fi. They don't have money for paying for farming chemicals. They have very rich soil. They don't spray. They produce the Djokovic and the this and the that in terms of athletes. The Russians have fallen behind a little bit on the athletic level, but in terms of intelligence, collective intelligence, the Russians are now way ahead of anybody else. The Chinese protect their people from Wi-Fi. Pregnant women have to wear protective clothing. They use other frequencies in Wi-Fi that have shown to not be biologically so damaging, but they're selling us the 5G, using all the destructive stuff, using themselves other frequencies, so they're smart, and they kind of know they don't have to enter a war with the US. They just can wait until the US commits suicide, and then they can shine, and that's pretty much what we're witnessing. And I like to emphasize that I love the US. I'm here by choice. Most of you who listen to this are here by fate. You were born here, or some things have washed you here. I choose to be here because I love this country. And as long as I can, I will make my voice heard.
I have a personal question about tonsils, because I heard you talk about these 4 things, and I've been working on those 4 things for a long time, and I seem to have this block in my tonsils. I'm going to Dr. Dorachov, and I know we're kind of moving into this big scope into personal questions, but I'm going to Dorachov next week. How important is it for tonsils, like for people with years of chronic illness, how important is it for people to get that taken care of before any of this other stuff?
So the most common blockage that we find in people is the anterior neck. And there's 3 major things that are here. One is the vagus nerve, that's now becoming popular in neurology to actually look at the health of that. I did that in my thesis 40 years ago. The other thing that's here is the drainage from the brain, both the lymphatic drainage and the venous drainage, which kind of follows this structure here. And the tonsils are a big lymph node, or really group of lymph nodes in the lymphatic drainage of the brain. And if you have chronic tonsillitis or microbes setting up the housekeeping there, they block the lymph flow. It can't go past the tonsils. And if the lymph flow from the brain, which mostly happens at night, doesn't happen, the brain builds up toxins and metabolic waste, and the overall perfusion of the brain decreases. And then adjacent to that problem is that the microbes like Lyme spirochetes and certain viruses, they're all addicted to the neurotransmitters that we're creating, and the richest place to actually eat or benefit from our neurotransmitters is the venous drainage of the brain, that's full of these neuropeptides. And so many of the pathogens love living in the veins here, but then it has a consequence that the immune system attacks them there, and that creates inflammation in these veins, and they narrow down. And when the veins are narrow, blood cannot leave the brain, and that means it can also not go in. So people get a decreased perfusion of the brain. This is now the status of almost everybody. And so to open that up, the tonsils have a huge role in that, so that we try to optimize the health of the tonsils either by freezing them, the regenerative cryotherapy that's called. There's Dr. Dorachov in Germany. He's a Russian brilliant physician. He's by training a pediatrician and ENT physician. He's double-boarded, brilliant man. But we also use tonsillectomy sometimes it's needed. We also have developed a manual lymph drainage massage, using a cream called Sophia Flow from Sophia Nutrition, that has been shown to chase the microbes out of the venous system and out of the lymphatic system and improve the general health in this area. So there is more blood flowing out of the brain and more blood can go in. And also the lymphatic clearing that happens at night is emphasized. And so I think what you plan on doing to go to Germany, you have the tonsils frozen, is a very good step, but it should be accompanied, with some of the other tools.
Okay. And what do you think about the Atlas? Do you refer your clients to any chiropractors who put the Atlas back in place, like Blair or Nuka? Because my journey, it was essential for me to have my Atlas back in place.
The orthogonal treatment of the Atlas. So the Atlas is, in my osteopathic understanding from the osteopaths I worked with, the position of the Atlas really is crucial for the functioning of the vagus nerve, which passes right by it. There's different theories why repositioning the Atlas, optimizing the relationship of the Atlas to the occiput and to the rest of the spine, can have such a foundational influence on the health of the body. We know it immediately normalizes functions in the autonomic nervous system, which was, I consider myself an expert because I did my thesis on it, but there's many ideas why Nuka works, but my working idea is it has a key function in the autonomic nervous system, the position of the Atlas, and especially on the vagus nerve. and we can measure that with heart rate variability. We can show after a good nuclear adjustment, the vagus normalizes and your lungs function, you have better oxygen exchange, your liver detox function, the kidney start producing a proper, it has an effect on every major system, but I think we're not underutilizing. We send people regularly to have that done, and we, when we've through with our patients, with treating Lyme disease and treating EBV and treating the toxicity of people, the further results we get with NUCA are maybe less dramatic than when NUCA is done at the beginning of the journey, but then, as you know, then it needs to be repeated. Then you're relapsing. As long as the toxins and the other things are unattended, the atlas will go out again and you have to do it again. And then we're concerned about, as long as it's based on x-rays, the radiation exposure is quite serious, and increases your risks of leukemia and other things later in life. So we're trying to find our way in that, but I have high respect for that. In general, I've learned more from chiropractic medicine than I have learned from conventional medicine in the last 50 years, really.
Yeah. I have one more question for you. It's up to you. I mean, what's your time?
Yeah, that's okay. Yeah.
Okay. So
I keep the answer short.
Yeah. Well, I'm okay. It's up to you. But ear infections. I recently, this is like embarrassing to admit to my audience, I haven't gone on antibiotics in 7 years, and literally a week ago I was swimming in this lagoon and I got this horrible ear infection. I tried for 3 days to get rid of it with colloidal silver and garlic juice and a couple of other things. I gave up. I had to go on antibiotics for the first time in 7 years. So my questions, and I'm trying to personally receive knowledge here while helping my audience at the same time. What can we do about ear infections to prevent going on antibiotics? And if someone's taking antibiotics, myself, how do we mitigate the damage? Because I feel horrible on them, actually. I feel the worst I've felt in years because of these antibiotics, actually.
Yeah, so first of all, something I learned in my years from India, if it's an external ear infection, so on this side of the eardrum, on the outside of the eardrum, there's a very simple treatment that works 100% of the time.
Wish we did this a week ago.
And, that is spending $5 on rubbing alcohol. You lie on the side and you pour rubbing alcohol and you fill it up. You lie there for 5 minutes. It gets a little bit warm, and then you empty it out. And as the rubbing alcohol evaporates, it completely dries the tissues up. And none of the ear infections can live in a dry environment. They need the moisture, and so it's usually one treatment is enough. Sometimes you have to do it at the most 3 times in a row, but then it's also recommended now every time you have a bath, where you immerse yourself get water in there for a few weeks, or if you have a shower, and some of our ears, like I got ears, where the water kind of runs in and doesn't drain out easily. So you just take an extra few minutes afterwards, lie on the side, put the alcohol in, and you will never have an ear infection again. So this is just something people don't know, and it's, of course, Johnson & Johnson will not tell you that, even though they're providing very good alcohol. But nobody's earning much money on it. But you had another part of the question that I forgot.
The other part was, now that I'm on antibiotics for the first time in 7 years, what do I do to mitigate these effects? I feel sensitive, I feel tired, I feel very, very not like myself right now. And I'm wondering what I can do.
So, of course, you could easily get paranoid and say, oh my God, I destroyed 99% of my gut microbiome, which you probably did. But most of it will come back within a few weeks, some take a few months or so. And the ideal thing in the future, so the ideal future treatment for that we know works is, if we do that with some of our Lyme patients, choose to go on months of antibiotic treatment, which I'm not in favor of because we don't see it working better than the herbal treatments we do. But some people make that choice, and we are recommending to take your poop, a few poops before you start. You make about 30 or so capsules. You put it in capsules, put it in the freezer, and then you do your antibiotics. And when you're done with the antibiotics, you do a 30-day course, taking always after a meal, taking one of the capsules. And it has the entire microbiome in it as you had it before you took antibiotics. And it very quickly, within a few days, will restore your normal microbiome. You know, so this is for the future. But right now, you know, it's really, you need to take prebiotics, you know, the stuff that feeds the healthy bugs and not the bad bugs. You need to take a good probiotics. We like the megaspore as part of it, you know, sort of. And you need to have a good colostrum extract that speeds up things. And I strongly know that you have to take some matrix minerals to take the glyphosate out of the food that you're eating. I mentioned that before, because that will push the regrowth of your flora in the direction of Clostridia and Salmonella. That's all published, you know. And so it's a vulnerable phase where the bugs, as they're coming back, as they're recovering from the antibiotics, it tends to be some of the evil bugs recover quicker than your good bugs. And if there's any glyphosate in the food or residues in your gut, the evil bugs will grow much, much faster than the other ones, and then that becomes the new normal, you know. And so it's a mix of those things, but I wouldn't worry too much. I mean, I know you've had some illness in the past and stuff, and so you're traumatized, and your level of fear is going to be bigger than the real danger, you know.
It's like, it's this weird thing of like, I'm so far removed from that world of hell, but when the slightest smell of hell comes back, it's literally like, oh my God, I'm back there. I'm there. Of course. And I never left. And it's such an illusion, you know, because my life is amazing now, and I have all these amazing people and connections, and it's like that trauma from that level of illness it's you know,
it's left you with a high level of vigilance, and some of that is good.
Yeah.
I wouldn't want to take that all away from you, just to temper it a little bit.
Yeah.